I just picked up because they looked so beautiful. No, you're mine now. Has sold like a shit ton of books. I just... Hello there, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back. My name is Priyanka, or PM in writing or on stage, because I am a spoken word poet, aspiring author, and bookish content creator. So this is part 2 of another video that I did, where I essentially showed you every single book that I have acquired from my work, because I work at Penguin Random House. That is my full-time job, and I just bring a book home almost every day. My boyfriend made that joke. I spoke about this in the previous video. My boyfriend made that joke the other day, and honestly, he's not wrong. And in that previous video, I said that I was going to talk about my self-help personal development books, along with the graphic novels and also miscellaneous books that I had taken, as well as my Penguin classics. So that's some of my Black Spine classics, as well as some modern classics that I have picked up. So let's kick this off on a positive note by showing you this book, which I am so in love with the concept of this. I haven't had much time to actually use it, but let me just show you what it is. It is essentially like a workbook for adults to help you feel more positive and think about things in your life that bring you joy. So for example, it's so cute. So there's like one page where you color in the pages, and it's like colors that make me happy. And then on this page, you write the title says, a dream that came true. And then you write something that came true in that box. On this side, it says congratulations to me, and you write something that you're proud of yourself for doing. And then on this side is a candle, and then you write like a smell that you really like. So stuff like that. It's so fun and silly and cute, and I was like, I have to pick this up. It was about to go to charity, and I was like, no, you're mine now. Next up are 2 books. I spoke about this in my previous video, but I was lucky enough to go to London Book Fair and help set up the Penguin Random House stand there. And at the end, when people were taking down the books, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take books home. And I literally took an entire like big plastic Waitrose bag full of books home, no regrets. And the 2 books that I took home within that pile were Ikigai and Manifest. I'm going to talk about Ikigai first. I picked it up purely for the cover, and I'm a sucker for a cherry blossom. What else can I say about that? Honestly, that was it. But this hardback is so pretty, and I'm genuinely very excited to read it. So Ikigai is meant to be some kind of like Japanese philosophy about how to live your life and how to like live your best life. And Manifest is obviously about the concept of manifestation, which, if you don't know, is essentially a practice wherein you kind of like wish for something. Lena Norms did a really great video about it, and you really hone in on what you want, and you're meant to kind of like bring the energy of what you want to you. I don't necessarily believe in it on like a spiritual level, but I am very interested in it. And sometimes I do feel like I manifested my job because I just wanted it so much. Next up is a proof copy of a book that I'm very excited for, which is coming out in... Oh, it's already out. It came out in April, which is Bittersweet by Susan Cain. And if you don't know Susan Cain, she is the author of Quiet, which was a book about introversion and has sold like a shit ton of books. And in this book, she explores the concept of bittersweetness, which according to the blurb is a tendency towards sorrow and longing, a piercing joy when beholding beauty, an acute awareness of the passing of time, and 2, a recognition of the dualities of life, light and dark, birth and death, bitter and sweet. I'm a person who often lives in like a very black and white thinking way, so I'm always like, that's good, that's bad. And I really want to learn more about how to live in that feeling of bittersweetness and live within the kind of grey rather than the black and white. So I'm genuinely very excited for that. And also the cover is very cool. It's like a little raindrop with clouds, and so it's kind of cut that way, and I believe it's cut that way in the finished copy as well. Next up are 2 books that I just picked up because they looked so beautiful, which is My Friend Fear and Made Out of Stars, and they're by the same author, Murali Patel. And this one looks obviously at fear, but if you look at the inside, it is stunning. So it's got a lot of illustrations and stuff, as well as kind of stories and anecdotes about fear. And it talks about how obviously you can befriend fear rather than, ironically, being afraid of fear. And Made Out of Stars is meant to be a journal, and it has that similar kind of illustration style, like you can see on the inside. And then it has prompts like, what does it mean to be alive? List 3 things that scare you. What makes you feel connected to yourself? So stuff like that. Next up is one that is so cute and I'm so excited to read, which is Big Panda and Tiny Dragon by James Norbury. And it is exactly what it sounds like. It is a story about the friendship between a big panda and a tiny dragon. And the illustrations are delightful. And honestly, I feel like recently I've really wanted to get back into reading books with pictures, which I know is technically manga, but like, I think having had the opportunity now to look at a lot of the kids' books coming out, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like it's just fun to read books with pictures and look at the pictures and go, I like that picture. Next up is Around the World in 80 Books by David Damrosch. And I was actually really happy with picking up this book because it was one of the first influencer-orientated campaigns that I helped out with. So I reached out to a few bookstagrammers and asked them if they wanted to review this book. And essentially, I studied David Damrosch at uni as well. David Damrosch is a professor of comparative literature, and in this book, he looks at, obviously, books from around the world, but also what we can take away from those books. So it's kind of a little bit literary theory focused, but also gives you like a nice kind of global view of literature. And I really liked the cover and the way the book was made, actually. Next up is the paperback version of the Penguin Classics book. The hardback is cloth bound and it is significantly nicer, but I feel like if I wanted to actually read it, I would pick up the paperback because then you can actually flip through it. And essentially, it's really interesting. So it's a combination of history about the Penguin Classics series, but also looking at Penguin Classics from different areas. So there's one on like ancient India and ancient Egypt, and then there's one on like America and London, and it's really interesting to look at it on that perspective. Next up is another book that I grabbed to heal my inner child, which is Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls. And it's kind of exactly what it sounds like from what you might assume from the title, which is it is stories about amazing women to tell younger women. And it makes me really happy that these kinds of books are coming out now and are becoming way more popular, because this is definitely something that I would have wanted to read when I was younger. And it's also illustrated by female artists, which is amazing. So for example, there's a section about Michelle Obama and Malala, and it's just amazing. Next up is a book that I love it so much, and I cannot tell you how happy I was when I got this in the post after I'd gotten it, which is Law Olympus. I don't know if this needs any explanation, but I know there's probably people out there who don't know what I'm talking about. So, Law Olympus was originally a webtoon, so a comic online, and has now been turned into a graphic novel. And my goodness, if you have read the webtoon and you're like, oh, I don't think I really need it, but I can read it online, look at how stunning it looks. And the paper quality is so nice and shiny. It's got that kind of magazine finish. Can you tell I work in publishing? It is absolutely gorgeous. This is really heavy though, but it is absolutely gorgeous. And essentially, Law Olympus is a retelling of the story of Hades and Persephone. And if you don't know what that is, look it up. But if you are in any way into ancient Greek mythology, or you were just looking for a really great romance story with so many twists and turns, highly recommend. Taking a very different turn in the tone now, this is a graphic novel that I picked up called Wake by Rebecca Hall, and essentially it looks at the time of the Atlantic slave trade and the women who revolted in the journey from the African continent to North America and how they led those revolutions. And finally, before we move on to the Penguin Classics, is Atlas of the Heart by Brené Brown. This is also one of the books that I picked up from London Book Fair, And feeling the weight of it, you might think that it's a coffee table book, but actually when I looked through the contents, I was like, this definitely has some kind of like practical stuff that you can take away from it. Like, number one is places we go when things are uncertain or too much. Number two is places we go when we compare. Number three is places we go when things don't go as planned. And so she focuses on those kinds of emotions and what happens when we take a different route of the heart. And I really liked how everything tied it together. So I'm actually very excited to like sit down, maybe one to like annotate, get my tamps, get my post-its. It'll be a good one. Now let's take a look at the Penguin classics. So first up is an older version of a modern classic. So I think these are from like the early 2000s. So on the back it says 2006. The version of a modern classic that you might be used to seeing in the store are these. So like the blue ones, but every imprint goes through different iterations. And so this is a very old one, and it is The Face of Another by Corbo Abe. And it is about a scientist who has a horrible accident and he's too scared to reveal his true face. So he mummifies himself, but then people end up getting more scared, and it's about how he navigates that. Next up is Childhood Youth Dependency by Tove Ditlevsen. And Tove Ditlevsen was an amazing literary writer based in Copenhagen. And this publication was essentially 3 of her books, so Childhood Youth Dependency, combined into one book and one translation. And actually, something that I want to do that I know Joel does on his channel, Fictional Fates, if you don't know who I'm talking about, is he mentions the translator of the books, and I realised that I wanted to do that too, as someone who reads a lot of translated literature. So, as well as mentioning Tove Ditlevsen, I will tell you that the book was translated by Tina Nunnally and Michael Fabler Goldman. And Childhood Youth Dependency explores Tove Ditlevsen's own life across those 3 stages. So childhood, youth is like her kind of teenage growing up years, and then dependency is when roughly she's an adult. And this book is so well written. I had to like stop this for a while and then come back to it because it was quite intense. I'd say definitely check out the trigger warnings before you pick it up, but the writing is just like so beautiful. And if you are feeling in a kind of like reflective mood and you want to think about your place in the world and life and death, this is the one for you. Next up is Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rice. And Wide Sargasso Sea was inspired by Jane Eyre and Mr. Rochester's husband, who, spoiler alert, if you've not read Jane Eyre, skip past this, was locked in, I believe it was the attic. Yes, because of women in the attic. She was locked in the attic. I believe her name was Bertha, and she was a black woman who he went to Jamaica, fell in love with, married, came back, and then she had hysteria, and then he locked her in the attic and pretended like she didn't exist. And so Wide Sargasso Sea is kind of reflective of that story. I think it's set in like 1830s Jamaica, and it's about a woman called Antoinette who falls in love with an Englishman and about how she navigates her relationship with him. Next up are my Black Spine classics, which are all collections, and they're basically kind of what they say on the tin, so I'll just run through them. First up is the Penguin Book of Modern African Poetry. This was published a while back. I don't think it's very new, but I remember I saw someone else was ordering it for themselves, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna order one for me too. And that cover is gorgeous. Next up is the Penguin Book of Mermaids, which was one of the first kind of campaigny bits of work that I did. Similarly, I helped out with the campaign for that, and I found a few influencers who posted about it on their bookstagrams, and I just love mermaids. And again, look at that cover. Amazing. Next up is the Penguin Book of American Short Stories, which I am a sucker for. I really love a good piece of American literature. I don't know if you can see, but up here, actually, the silver modern classics are all John Steinbeck. The cover I thought was actually really interesting, that it shows like a lounge with a TV. For example, if you take the Penguin Book of Modern African Poetry, it's got like quite interesting design. So something to think about. Next up is the Penguin Book of Japanese Short Stories, which again, it's always really interesting to look at these covers and think about it. I really love this cover so much. I think it is gorgeous and obviously shows what I assume, actually looking at it now, it doesn't look like a bullet train. I was going to say it looks like the Shinkansen. And again, exactly what it says on the tin, but actually considerably thicker than the last two, which is interesting. And finally, another Japanese collection of writing, which is Travels with a Writing Brush, which is a collection of Japanese travel writing, it's like classic travel writing, so it's quite late, set around like the Edo period or even earlier than that as well. And again, what a gorgeous cover. I love that so much. And again, I'm a huge sucker for Japanese writing, so I was like, yes. So that was all the books that I have acquired from work in some way or another. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. That would mean a lot to me. And leave a comment below. Did you have a favourite book? Are there any that you are really excited to read? Are you a Lore Olympus nerd like me? Please let me know. We can be friends. I am always down to chat to people all the time about Lore Olympus. Thank you so much for watching. Follow me on Instagram if you haven't already. And I hope you're having a lovely day as always. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.